Right guys, welcome back. In this video we're going to replicate that switch setup just to give ourselves a little bit of I don't know what's the word, make our asset a bit more robust so that we know that when we hand it off it's going to be usable and kind of user friendly. So the next thing we want to do is we want to run that same check again based on the terrain. So if there is a terrain plugged in here, we want to use this raycast to project the points onto it. However, if there's not a terrain, if it's just going on some flat floor plane geometry, we don't need it. So we can switch using that switch trick again, using a switch node. So I'm going to drop down switch. Said switch a lot there. And let's just think about what we're attempting to do. So our normal points are sat there quite nicely on the origin where we want them. So that's what we want, okay, as our input 0. And then we can pass that through the switch to all our relevant pieces, yeah. But for our second input into the switch, if there is a terrain, then we want to move our points up in the air and then project them back down. Okay, so we can plug that into our second input. So the principle is exactly the same. If in Unreal we plug in a landscape, and in fact I think it will automatically detect if you've got a landscape in there. It's that clever. As long as we've named this terrain or landscape, it'll automatically figure it out for us. So in the switch node, again, look, we've got our two inputs here. We want to run that same expression again. So I'm going to select the input on the switch, do Alt-E to bring up my expression editor again, and we're just going to do that same expression, but this time we're going to reference the channel string on our terrain input. So we'll open some speech marks, we'll go up a level, and we'll reference our terrain input. And if you remember, the parameter name is object path. Okay, and then close the speech marks, close the brackets, and the string that we're testing for, again, is nothing. So if the string is equal to nothing, then we want to pass through that 0th or the first index. But if there is something plugged into it, then we want to pass through input 1. Okay, so simple as that. And again, just a simple logical test. Is this empty? Yes or no is basically what we're saying here. So we'll hit apply and accept. And you can see our system's working in that we're now taking that first input. But if we go back and just test by plugging in our test terrain here on the object merge, so we'll just find where our terrain is, select it, and go back to our switch. If I put the display flag on it, you can see now that we've got the terrain, we're using this little ray casting system to project those points onto it. Okay, so if I remove that, you can see we snap back. So we're adding a little bit of logic into our procedural network there. Okay, so with that, I just realized I need to tidy up this network here. So from our switch, we need to go into our copy to points node. So I'm just going to make that connection. We don't need this transform anymore. We don't need this curve anymore. Just tidying up. These are our inputs into our system. This is our kind of emergency geometry. If it doesn't detect a curve or it doesn't detect any terrain, we've got this emergency fallback geometry, just so we don't get an empty screen. And let's go back down, all the way down to the bottom. One more thing we need to do, we just need to add some vertex color to our planky bit, and we can just do that with a color node. And we won't do anything fancy with this. You could again sort of add a gradient to it, but for this we're just going to keep it simple. I'm going to set that over to vertex, and I'm going to give it a red color, just so that our material blends has got all the attributes that it needs. Alright, cool. So let's have a think about what parameters we want to promote. Well, we've already started highlighting them. So this resample node sort of dictates how many fence posts we're going to get. So that could be a good parameter to promote. What else could we have? We could have the Y position of this middle piece, so we can sort of tweak where we want that to go. So we'll colour that in yellow as well by pressing C. And what else? We could possibly take our p-scale random attribute and promote this parameter so we can have a wider range of random values, so that might be a good one to have. And also we need to promote these two object merge up to the digital asset level as well. So we've got a bit of a roadmap now of the parameters that we want to promote. So what I'm going to do now is just convert this to a digital asset, and that is as easy as just selecting all the nodes, putting them into a subnetwork, and then we'll call this fence tool. I'm going to call this one fence tool videos, just because I've got one on disk already that I've been working on in my research. Okay, so with that subnetwork we can convert that to a digital asset. All right, so if I right click, create digital asset, and it's going to ask you where do you want to save it. By default it's going to save it to your Houdini library, which means every time you open up Houdini you'll have access to this as a digital asset. So if it's a tool that you're going to use, you know, day to day working with Houdini, you might want to do that. If it's specific to a project, it kind of makes sense that you'd save it local to that project, so you don't suddenly have hundreds and hundreds of digital assets in your Houdini library. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save it to the HIP file, which is where I've currently got my this is where my project is based. HIP is a shortcut for project, and I've created a folder called HDA. Okay, and there you can see the one that I've been working with as a test. So I'm just going to tidy up that name. Fence tool videos will work for me. Take a look at the file format as well. It's HDA, which stands for Houdini Digital Asset. NC stands for non-commercial because we're using the education version. So once you've done that, you can hit accept and hit accept again, and this will bring up the digital asset parameter window. Looks scary, really isn't. This just gives you the opportunity to sort of specify some default parameters for this digital asset as it comes in and as other people use it. The basic parameters are all absolutely fine. If we jump across to the parameters tab, this is where we can build our user interface. Now if you remember back to the brief, the user interface is part of it, so we need to be able to learn how to build and develop these digital assets. So if we jump back inside our fence tool, we can start bringing in all these parameters that we've highlighted in yellow. Okay, so the first one I'm going to bring in is this curve input. So obviously this is going to be a really important one for our asset when we use it in Engine. So I'm just going to, on this object 1 field, I'm just going to click and drag onto the root there, and you can see it'll add it as a path. I'm going to give it a name, so I'm going to call it curve input. And again, it's important to use curve because Houdini Engine will pick up on this word and it'll specify that this is it's expecting a curve. All right, I'm going to give it a human readable label, which is curve input. Cool. I'm going to do the same for the terrain. Just drag that in there. Call it terrain input, and then we'll give it a name. Landscape. I think in Unreal calls them landscapes, doesn't it, not terrain, so we'll try and keep our naming sort of consistent. Hit apply. You can see that these fields go green, which means they're referencing something on the digital asset, which is great. Next thing is our resample node, and it's this length parameter here we're interested in, so I'm just going to drag that, drop it onto the root, and we'll call this one fence post spacing. And what else did we say we could have? Yeah, this transform Y. So for the transform Y on the long planky bit, we can just select that value that we've got there and just drag it, and then we can just say offset Y. So we'll hit apply. We'll hit accept, and we'll do our first test in Unreal. Okay, so apply, accept, and we press U to jump up a level, and we'll just triple check that we've saved this digital asset to disk. So I'm going to go to my assets menu, save asset, and there's my digital asset, so I can save that. Alright, so here we are, ready to test. So we will jump across to Unreal Engine. We will find our digital asset on disk. So let me dig around where I've saved it, and there it is, Fence Tool Videos Houdini HDA file. And we can drag that into our content browser in Unreal. If everything is hooked up and the plugin is installed correctly, you should see the Houdini logo with DA for digital asset installed, and then we can just drag that out into our scene. Awesome. So seems to be working okay. And if we take a look in our parameters here, the Houdini parameters, you can see those parameters that we promoted on our digital asset have been sort of transferred across into Unreal. Our landscape input is looking for landscapes. There are currently none in this scene, so we're fine. So our switching system is working well. And what we can do, if you notice, because we named our curve input, Unreal has added a spline actor to our asset. So if we select this end node of our spline, hold down Alt, and then just click and drag, you can see that our fence asset is working pretty well. So we can pass this off to a level designer, give them a sort of a quick overview on how it works, and they can then run across the entire level, placing down fences, and everything is groovy. As you can see, our vertex color is coming through fine. We can use that in a shader to drive material parameters, whether that's blending between two bitmap images or blending between two colors, however you want to use it. So we're starting to pull everything together. So everything is working there, and we've got our additional parameters, so we can up the fence post spacing, and everything will kind of update as you would expect. Let's just test that offset in Y. Yeah, so our middle bit is working. So there you go. So that is just the tip of the iceberg of Houdini Engine and working with Houdini digital assets in this way. Really powerful. I'm such a big fan of Houdini Engine and the way that it can really speed up your workflow. But more importantly than that, it's really powerful when you are working with other people who might not be Houdini users, but you can make these tools really usable, and they can go and populate the entire level with trees or fences or rocks. However you design these systems to work, you can make them so that they're so user friendly that anybody who understands Unreal Engine can just start and pick them up and just run with it. Alright, in the next video, what we're going to do is we are going to just take a look at, we'll build a quick shader for this just to make sure it's working, and we're going to go over some Unreal specific attributes that we can use in Houdini as well to again just really speed up our workflow. If you've stuck around for this long, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.